sports are really important vehicles for relationships.
We have purpose. We have a why. We bring people together. We connect.
I feel like God is our greatest supporter and our greatest coach.
Welcome to Rabbi on the Sidelines. This is Rabbi Sherman from Sinai Temple in Los Angeles. This week we are joined by a director of an amazing film called Meandering Scars. But before I get to Meandering Scars, I want to tell you how I met this guest, Allison Noorlian. Allison also directed and produced a short film called 13, which is about her sister, who was the first bat mitzvah of a special needs young person in her synagogue in Voorhees, New Jersey, at Congregation Bethel. It just happens that my sister is also a rabbi there, and we have a brother of blessed memory, Eyal, who also was of special needs. And so it was truly beshert. It was meant to be when Allison knocked on our door at Sinai Temple and said, "We want to film 13. After learning about the film 13 and talking about sports and special needs, I found out that Allison also directed an unbelievable documentary called Meandering Scars about suicide and mental health awareness within the disability journey, when she contacted Erica Bogan, who is an adaptive athlete who decided to simply climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And so to hear that story, we are joined today by Allison Noorlian. Allison, it's great to have you on Rabbi on the Sidelines.
So good to be here. Thank you, Rabbi.
So when we met and talked about 13, I never imagined that we would be doing this on a sports and faith podcast about this unbelievable documentary called Meandering Scars. But before we get there, let's actually talk about our journey together and about your unbelievable sister and why you decided to focus your directorship, if you wish, if that's a word, on the special needs world, which you were doing unbelievable things in.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yeah, so just a little bit about me. I was raised in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and I was raised by a single mom, and I have an older sister who is profoundly developmentally disabled. And when you are born into the disability world, it's your norm. I never viewed my sister as anything but my sister until the world decided in a hostile way to share with me that our family would be treated differently because of many things, including my Jewish faith and including my sister with disabilities. And so I really set out. I like to say that my experience growing up, both as a Jewish person and with a sister who has disabilities, I took what the world told me was wrong with me and made it my superpower, if you will. And my sister, who, like I told you, she's profoundly developmentally disabled. She is my inspiration for everything. She was my inspiration for my whole professional career. I was an advocate before I even knew what that word meant. I mean, I could share stories with you from my childhood. But
we can share.
I ultimately, I'll share a quick story. I think this is sort of, I think, the beginning of my advocacy, where I really, I look back and I'm like, okay, and it's all because of my mom, which is, fast forward, why I decided to honor my mom and my sister in 13, which you just sort of mentioned. But when I was in 7th grade, we were reading this book. It was called Flowers for Algernon in our English class. And the book features a disabled character. And I'll never forget, my classmates started making fun of people with disabilities, using the R word, saying, some making unsavory comments. And I went home very upset and crying to my mom. And my mom's response was, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And so I ended up actually doing a presentation in my school, in my class, about disability. And I brought my sister in, I brought my mom in. And to make a long story short, years later, I ran into an old classmate from that class who told me I changed his perspective on disability. He never used the R word again. And he thanked me as an adult. And that really, I think, was the beginning of my journey of trying to, like I say, change the way the world views disability. So then fast forward, I became a journalist. I tried to tell as many disability stories as possible. I worked in TV news. I won a character and Catalyst for Change Award from the Arc of Virginia for all of the disability-focused stories that I told. And then fast forward, I became a filmmaker focused on this community as well.
Fast forward, I became a rabbi for the exact same story that you just told. I'm trying to think, actually, when I got to college at List College at Columbia University, there was a class called List 101. It was a freshman orientation class. It was a leadership position that I had as a sophomore. And I said, what do you want to teach our residents in our dorm? And I said, I want to teach them about disabilities. And I brought my brother's VHS bar mitzvah video, which I know a little of 13 as we got to know each other. And I haven't stopped telling that story. In fact, every year I go into our 5th grade Sinai Kibbutz Academy, which I hope you'll come to next year during Jewish Disability Awareness Month as we do that program together. So before we transition to Meandering Scars, how can people see 13 and bring it to their community? Because it's such an important short documentary film.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So 13, we do have educational distribution for 13 through a filmmaker co-op called New Day. And so it was earlier this year, it was absolutely amazing. We had so many synagogues, Jewish institutions, Jewish spaces host not only me, but even my mom and my sister came to the Bethel screening of 13
So
with your sister. Yeah, such a small world.
Yes.
Actually, and if I can share a little bit about that story, because I think it's so cool. It's such, as you said, Beshert, it's kismet. For your listeners and your viewers, 13 is a love letter to my mother and my sister, and it's as the rabbi said, it's a story about a mother advocating for her profoundly disabled nonverbal daughter to have a bat mitzvah in their synagogue in the 90s. Again, this takes place back in the 90s when things were a little bit different than they are now. And to make a long story short, I wrote the script, and we were looking for a place to film, and we went to a few synagogues, but then we met you, Rabbi. And as soon as I met you, I'll never forget coming into Sinai, meeting Rebecca, and Rebecca saying to me, oh my gosh, you have to meet. I told her about what the film was about, and she said, you have to meet Rabbi Sherman. And then we met, and then it was like, oh, well, we're filming here. There's no question, no question about it. And then to find out then that your sister is now the rabbi at the synagogue where my sister was bat mitzvah, that then inspired me to write this script. It's just unreal. It's such a small world.
Yes, way to make me cry on my own show here before Shabbat. But it's tears of memory and tears of joy. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and I really hope everybody has a chance to see that. And you never think when a loved one actually passes away how somebody else is going to help tell that story, and just it's gratitude to you. So thank you.
No,
okay,
thank you.
Now people are wondering, why are we talking about this when it's a sports and faith show? And so I invited you to the faith sports and connection conference because I thought it would be really interesting. And you're like, oh, by the way, I have this film called Meandering Scars, and it's about faith, sports, mental health, and disabilities. And when people ask me, like, boil yourself down to 3 things, I say faith, sports, and disability. And if somebody can actually do that in one film, then you got to talk to them, and that's you. Yeah. So take us through this journey of Meandering Scars. What is this film, and why should people begin, God willing, to see this soon?
Amazing. Thank you so much for that introduction. So Meandering Scars, I'll start from when we first just found out about the story, because I think it's such a kind of funny story. It's in itself. When Cody, my business partner, and I started Birdmind, which is our company, we weren't sure what our first documentary was going to be, but we knew we wanted to focus on disability because of my advocacy and how it's a special, has a special place in my heart. So what we decided as millennial journalists, we were like, we know how to share stories. We know social media. So why don't we create a series that at this point will just live online? It'll live on YouTube and social media. So we decided on the topic of people with disabilities making an impact in the fitness industry. And so through my connections, I was introduced to all these different people, Paralympians, weightlifting champions, all these different people with disabilities, making their way through their own fitness journey. And so I was introduced to this woman, Erica Bogan. She was introduced to me as a CrossFit and a Spartan, which is an obstacle course race, athlete. And so I was doing pre-interviews at this point. I was Zooming with people, just asking them for, their information, what their sport is, how they were, what they're basically about their journey, just to see if they were a good fit for this series we were going to do. And so Erica and I connect. We talk on Zoom. She's, from Charlotte, North Carolina. Also, this is in 2020. So this is like, the height
Everybody's
of the
stuck.
pandemic. Yeah,
Yes.
everyone's stuck inside. And so we're chatting and, I'm like, oh, you'd be perfect for this series I'm doing. And then at the very end of our conversation, we're just kind of having, it's very casual, just kind of getting to know each other. And she's like, oh, by the way, I'm climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And I was like, what do you mean you're climbing Mount Kilimanjaro?
Exactly.
And she starts telling me, I'm going to do this with my friends who I met through this nonprofit that I'm part of. And
that's
I have
called what
struggled.
again? The Scars?
So it doesn't exist anymore, but it was called
Okay.
More Heart Than Scars. They kind
Yes,
and
yes.
new now there's a new nonprofit that exists in its place called Dealers of Hope that Erica
Yes.
and Joey started. But yeah, at the time it was called More Heart Than Scars. And so she was challenging herself physically through this nonprofit and realized how doing that, being a part of, sports, like being part of these obstacle course races really helped her mentally. And so she said, I had a lot of suicidal thoughts throughout my life, suicidal attempts, and she had many friends die by suicide. And she said, I want to spread awareness about this. And that for me was what really sold it to me. I was like, okay, it's already amazing this woman is climbing this mountain because, that in itself is just unreal. But the fact that she was doing it with this purpose really is what sold me on the story. And so I called Cody, my business partner. I said, I think I found our first documentary. We never ended up doing that series because we just dove right into documenting Erica and her journey and her friend's journey, before and up the mountain.
And what made you think, you know what, I'm going to climb that mountain too? This is not exactly, Wilshire Boulevard climbing up from Beverly Glen.
Yeah. I think there's a few different reasons. One, financial reasons, like we couldn't afford to, hire people.
Send somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. But I think mostly, Cody and I, we really wanted to be flies on the wall. We wanted to be part of her entire journey. And honestly, doing that really changed my life. Like it changed me. And as somebody who myself struggles with my own mental health struggles, I have anxiety that I'm very open about. And that was, I had to prepare for that climb. I not only was training physically, but I started seeing a therapist because I was like, I need to do whatever I can do to make sure if I'm on that mountain and start having like an anxiety or panic attack that I know I did everything I could to make sure that I'm in the right space on this mountain and I can get through anything.
That's unbelievable. Number one, that you watched it. And then to watch Erica climb. First, let's just go into Erica's story for a moment because she wasn't born with a disability. I believe it was through an abusive relationship that she was with an abusive person and got into a horrific car accident, and she sort of blanks out, and the next thing she knows she's in a coma. But her mother, was quoted as saying basically, not if she will survive, but my daughter will survive, and she does it. We're coming off, yesterday ended Passover, and it's about slavery to freedom. And Erica's not Jewish, but this is a very Jewish story, from slavery to freedom, in a very individual but making it a collective way. What do you think got Erica from slavery to freedom in the way of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro?
I think it's really unbelievable. I think that she, for so many years, she shares with us that after paralysis, of course, and you said it, so she was not always disabled. She was born non-disabled, and eventually she was in a domestic violence situation with an ex, and that's what led her to have this disability. She became paralyzed from that accident from the waist down. And I think at first, of course, the initial shock of going from a non-disabled body to a disabled body was difficult for her. But then once she accepted her new reality and learned to move forward with it, for her, really the struggles she experienced throughout the next, I would say, 18 to 20 years, because we met her, I think she just surpassed like 21, 22 years of paralysis.
Wow.
It is. Yeah. And I think that, the next the reason she struggled going forward after this happened to her was less about the disability and more about living in a world, as she says, that's not built for her. So living in an inaccessible society that often demeans people with disabilities, in a system that works against people with disabilities. She couldn't financially, she was struggling, constantly behind, trying to catch up. So there were so many, the inaccessibility of the world, the financial restraints, the feeling as if, she felt like she was a burden among,
Actually,
her peers.
I have a quote here that I wrote down when she says, "I have a fear that nobody will want me. No one will
Yeah.
want you." And that really, really stuck out, in terms of, and she mentioned that like everybody calls these para athletes inspirational,
Yep.
but when they close the doors behind them, they're still stuck with a lot of inaccessible. I always tell people when I do my disability talks, I see the world through curb cuts, and there weren't many
Mhm.
curb cuts on Mount Kilimanjaro. I was
Yeah.
shocked that it wasn't the path, but this was not just her going like this in a wheelchair, but you guys were like with poles lifting her up. What did that
Yeah.
take? And did you know that that's what it was going to look like when you were climbing that mountain with Erica?
When I think about the story Meandering Scars, of course there's so much about it that I love. I'm biased because it's my documentary, but one of my favorite parts, or if not my favorite part, is the friendship between Erica, Joey, Jonathan, and her team. Honestly,
Mhm.
that'll make me emotional thinking about, because I think it is so beautiful to realize that none of us can survive in this world alone.
Mhm.
And the reality is, yes, Erica has a disability, physical disability, but while her friends, in many cases and in many ways on that mountain, helped her through the physical obstacles, she was helping them mentally. And I think there is just something so beautiful to that, realization that we all have something to offer. We're all, we're all able in some way, and bringing us all in. And when you have this friend group all come together to work towards this just unbelievable feat, just because she has the physical disability doesn't mean that she's going to be the one who is necessarily struggling. Like, her friends were struggling and she was helping
Mhm.
them through it. And so, I think that's like my favorite part about Meandering Scars is that lesson. And so, no, I didn't necessarily, I went into climbing that mountain thinking I was prepared. In some way, we did everything we could to prepare. We had a 5-person videographer team. So it was Cody, me, our director of photography, Valentina V, Becca, who was one of our cam ops, and my cousin actually came with us, Bobby Katz, who is what did our drone operation
Oh,
and our
nice.
GoPro
That's
operation.
awesome.
And so we had this big, a small but mighty team of camera operators. And then we went with this group of people, and we knew somewhat of what it was going to look like because we prepared with Erica and her team ahead of time to know what shots we were going to get, know what we wanted out of each day. But of course, things changed and shifted on the mountain. And so it's like, it's as a documentary does, it doesn't always go the way that you're thinking it's going to go. So, and then on top of it, you're filming this documentary,
Yeah, that's
dealing
crazy.
with your own struggles on that mountain. I mean, it was physically I like to say it was physically, emotionally, and mentally the hardest thing I've ever done in my life is climbing that mountain,
Mhm.
hands
Mhm.
down. So,
And so at the end of the film, I believe Erica talks about this idea of disabled joy. What
mhm,
is disabled joy, and how can we begin to create that space? I know it's a space that my family created for my brother, specifically through sports. When my brother went
mhm,
to middle school, and the phys ed teacher told my mom, "You know what? Ayal's gonna just chill out for the next 30 minutes." And she said, "Oh, what sport are you guys playing?" And it was field hockey. Well, in 10 minutes, there was a field hockey stick attached to his motorized wheelchair, and he was in the game. For Little League,
oh,
I pushed him around the bases for the Challenger Little League, and he was a third
yeah,
base coach wearing the same uniform as me in my Little League
mhm,
team. It was disabled joy, and it was simply that.
mhm,
And that's why I do this podcast, Rabbi on the Sidelines, because it was his joy through sports that really was not an escape, but a place of disabled joy for all of us. And it's led me
yeah.
to do things that I never expected. So, what is disabled joy that Eric is speaking about, and how can we create that space?
I think in general, joy depends on the person, right? And I think actually Lauren, who is our researcher in the film, she makes a comment that I never thought about until meeting her. That is, I remember when she said it, it gave me chills, but who decides in society, what's worthwhile? Able-bodied people. And that's why it's so often people with disabilities are looked down upon, because they're looked at, they're not able to do X, Y, and Z like a non-disabled person. But what I love is that each individual person has their own idea of what joy and what accomplishment is, right? And so for Erica, disabled joy, it's being able to be on that obstacle course, be going through this Spartan race, something that even some non-disabled people can do. And she is out there in the mud and in the grassy fields and the sand, and she is going through this intense obstacle course with her friends. That is her joy. Her joy is being with her family, being with her cats, being with her friends. This is what she finds. That's what fills her cup up. And what else is her joy is spreading, the message of inclusion and accessibility. And so what I like to sort of, I think every person, like I said, has an idea of what joy is for them. And, that's definitely Erica's joy is what I just said. And yeah.
And I actually appreciate that you didn't hide away from a lot of the difficult stuff too. She talks a lot about the catheter and how she uses the restroom. Like that's stuff
Yeah.
that I know probably you and I have seen growing up, but often people, only see them reach the summit and high five. But like what goes into getting a child to school and getting dressed in the morning, like I really appreciated that aspect of not shying away from the life of a disabled person, and as importantly, the life of the people around that disabled person that allow that person to find that disabled joy too. It was really beautiful. And so when she's in the hospital and Erica's mom tells the doctor, "You're not God," I think that's a line that probably both of us heard a lot from our parents to other people that tried to make the decisions for our siblings. Take that phrase from Erica's mother, "You're not God," and what does that mean in terms of the world of disabilities?
I think that means, I think when people with disabilities are born and are going through life, we are often there is often a limit put on them. There is I know that this analogy is usually used for women, but there's a metaphorical roof that they can hit, that and then you can't break through that glass ceiling. There's a glass ceiling is what I should say. And I think that statement, "You're not God," you as a doctor or as a, even as a professional in that space, of course they have expertise, but their expertise only goes so far. You don't know how an individual, especially as a baby, if you're talking about a baby and a child, how that person is going to grow up, and how, with services and the right interventions, what can happen for that child. And I've talked to. It's funny. I work today at a gym for people with disabilities, which I think I've told you about. Zeus Fitness. Jake
Yeah,
Weiner.
Jake Weiner, everybody. Let's give a shout out to Jake,
And
my
we talk.
former camper.
Shout out to Jake and Zeus.
Yes.
But I think what's so special about that and like our athletes is, I've talked to so many athletes at that gym. I remember talking to this one woman, Mary, who has I believe she has CP, but she told me that when she was born, the doctors told her like she was not going to live past, I think, like 5. I can't remember the age, but she wasn't going to live long. She was not going to amount to anything. She was, not going to be able to walk or talk or do this or do that. I mean, Mary just turned 60 years old. This woman has lived a full, incredible life. And if her parents had listened to the doctors, you know what I mean? And so it's this reality where you cannot put a cap on what someone is capable of. We need to treat people with that, give them the ability and the believe that there's, full competency, and talk to them like they are understanding, and work with them like they are understanding. And help coach them through, whatever it is that they're struggling with, because you never know what someone is capable of.
And I think somebody's Mount Kilimanjaro can be a different barrier.
Yes.
So for instance, when my brother passed away, we started a foundation called Ayal's Flowers, which helps people who don't have coverage for different things. And one of the first things that we covered for this young man who was nonverbal autistic was actually a couple lessons with Jake Wiener at Zeus Fitness. And after 6 sessions, this young man jumped like 3 feet, like just jumped.
Yep.
And for that mother, that was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And I think, we don't have to always, climb Mount Kilimanjaro, able-bodied or disabled bodies, to actually climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I think that's really a beautiful thing, as you said, especially as you see the clients at Zeus Fitness who in the 1990s, that was not available to our siblings to just have a regular fitness center either. So I have 2 more questions. The first is coming down the mountain. Just how does that work? I chat GPT'd it after. Like, you get there and you don't take the Matsada cable car down. What does that journey down the mountain look like when you had just this amazing upward motion up there? Is it sort of a downer? Is it like, oh my God, am I going to do this again? I'm never going to see the summit. What does that down aspect look like?
I'll tell you, for me personally, when we got to the top, well, actually, and I should rephrase because I don't want to spoil the movie, but just going down the mountain, I'll say it was so hard. Going up the mountain, of course, was challenging in so many ways, but I think I was so exhausted. My feet were on fire. That's what that's the only way I can describe it to you. I've never been in so much physical pain in my life. And you have 2 days, it's a 2-day trek, and you're just physically so spent. You're so and emotionally completely spent, and you just have to keep going. I mean, it really is like in so many ways. I sometimes when I think about human beings, and I feel like this is an example. There's so many examples of this, but I remember thinking to myself, I don't know how I can go on. Like, how can I keep putting one foot in front of the other? My feet are going to fall off. And somehow, I did it. But yes, it was so challenging. I could not wait to be down. And also, like, you're not showering for 7 days.
Yeah.
And that was very difficult for me. And so it was going down the mountain was, I would argue, for me personally, the hardest aspect of this climb.
And so you did up and down in 7 days?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's really impressive. And there was no sled going down. It wasn't like the JCC in winter break.
No sled. Just your legs and your feet.
And so I want to conclude with the question that you started with. You said, this film and disabilities. And by the way, now I'm just thinking about it. So many of my episodes of this podcast have been disabled athletes, with Israel Parasports Center, with the guy who won the Paris Open, also from Israel. Amazing athletes. I would love to connect you with them and be part of this community. But when you started this, you said, you wanted to change others. But how has Meandering Scars, and maybe tell me a little about the title as well, why you chose that title? Why did you choose this title? And at the end, how did Meandering Scars change you?
Well, the title Meandering Scars, so mental health, and this is also included why I'm sure you noticed, we filmed after the climb, right? And so we came back from the mountain and we continued filming with Erica, and we wanted to see what happens to if she accomplishes this amazing feat of reaching the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, and even if she didn't, what happens next, right? And so Meandering Scars, our mental health journey, our journey in general, it's not a straight shot. It's meandering. It's a mental health is up and down. It's a constant. You have highs and you have lows, and it's learning to move through that meandering journey with your scars and be able to remember that there is still going to be light after the darkness, even when you still go through darkness.
I want to pause right there for a second, because on the faith aspect, that was what we just read in our Torah over Passover, that it wasn't a straight shot from slavery to freedom. If they took Waze or Google Maps, they would have been there in a couple of days, but they were in that desert for 40 years. And actually the rabbis teach us that if they took the straight shot, they weren't ready. They needed that
Mhm.
meandering in order to ready themselves for their freedom. So beautiful. I
Yeah.
love that analogy. And
Thank
how has
you.
it changed
Thank
you?
you. So, I mean, it's funny. I guess I should have waited to share about zoos now, because really, I remember while I was going through the process of creating Meandering Scars, I was realizing I'm a disability advocate. I know so much about disabled people. I've met and am friends with, and my family lived in disability culture, and somehow, and on the other opposite side, I am a big fitness and health advocate, but I had never combined the two. I had never thought about how fitness is so important in movement for people with
Mhm.
disabilities and their mental health. And ultimately, that's what led me to zoos. I was thinking one day about what else I could be filling my day with. And I remember I had met Jake years prior because a friend introduced us. My friend said to me, I know you're a disability advocate and I know you are very into fitness and health. You need to meet my friend Jake. He runs this gym for people with disabilities. So he connected us in 2021. I did a story about Jake and zoos for my company Birdmind that lives on social media. And then fast forward after I'm done this climb, and I'm sitting there thinking, and I'm like, I need to see what this guy, like, if I can be a coach for people with disabilities at this gym. And I reached out to Jake and I just said, hey, I don't know if you remember me. And he was like, I remember you, and come into zoos. And I came in, and the next thing you know, I'm working there. and um and I truly am living my purpose every day. Um
Mm.
Zoos combines everything that I love. It's disability. And I don't know if I shared this with you before, but Jake and Shachar actually created a position for me there. So I'm a digital media specialist. So
Oh,
I'm
amazing.
doing like all the media stuff that, my movies and stuff. I'm now creating all their videos for Zeus Tube, and I'm writing their blog articles. So I'm using my journalism and my video and filmmaking background. So I'm combining disability, filmmaking, writing, and then my passion for fitness and health all in one place. It's amazing. And so Meandering Scars really changed me. I mean,
Well,
it changed me
it's
just my
so
whole life.
it's crazy that you say that, because now that I'm thinking about it, when Jake was my camper and I took him to Israel, that was also one of the first times that I told my brother's story publicly. And he listened
Wow.
to that so many years ago. And now I'm talking to you. And so it has changed your life as well. I hope Jake Wiener's listening to this, as well as Shachar, who was my cantor on the family service high holidays at Shomrei Torah for many years as well. And
Oh, wow.
meandering, you don't know where your journey is going to
No.
lead you, but I know that it has led us to meet each other. And I know this is just the beginning of this really exciting journey that's going to not just change ourselves, because I know our siblings have changed us, but also changed so many others in the days, months, and years ahead. So this has been a very special treat to not interview, but to have a public discussion with you, Allison, instead of just on
Thank
a
you.
text message, but to share the love of what we do and the purpose of our lives with so many others who are watching, whether they love faith, whether they love sports, whether they're looking to be involved with advocacy for the disabled world. Most importantly, to bring joy to people who may not find that joy in the way that we find it, but we know that
Yeah.
is there within their hearts and their souls. So Allison Noorlian, director of Meandering Scars. Hopefully soon we'll find out where we can see that. And we'll do a program here at Sinai Temple to welcome you, Zeus Fitness, Jake Wiener, all of the people that have influenced our lives so much. Allison, it's wonderful to see you, and we're looking forward to seeing you soon on Rabbi on the Sidelines. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi. You too.